I am holding a bottle of digoxin. It costs roughly $800 a month without insurance. My sister Chloe was holding a Lady Dior bag that costs $6,500. It took me 3 months to realize that the pills inside the bottle were actually just crushed sugar mints, and the bag was paid for with my grandmother's heartbeat. If you want to know how I sent my own sister to prison for elder abuse while the frosting was still wet on our grandmother's 80th birthday cake, stay with me until the end. My name is Elena. I'm 32. I'm an ICU nurse, and I know exactly what heart failure smells like. Let's just say the party didn't end with a toast. It ended with the strobe light flicker of red and blue police lights bouncing off the crystal punch bowl my mother had spent 3 days polishing. I remember the sound vividly, not the screaming because honestly, the room was terrifyingly silent, but the heavy metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight around Chloe's wrists. She was wearing this white lace dress, trying to look like an angel, but under those harsh emergency lights, she just looked like a thief who had finally run out of runway. The paramedics were already rolling Nana Rose out on a stretcher, bypassing the stunned guests who were still holding their forks mid-air, frozen like statues in a museum of bad decisions. And me? I was standing by the door, holding the doorframe so tight my knuckles were white, trying to keep my knees from buckling. I wasn't happy. You have to understand that. I wasn't celebrating. I felt like I had just cut off my own arm to save the rest of the body. But when I looked at Chloe, really looked at her, and saw that she wasn't looking at Nana, but was instead trying to hide her new designer clutch behind her back while the officer read her rights, the guilt evaporated. That was the moment I knew I hadn't destroyed a family. I had excised a tumor. But to understand why I had to call the police on my own flesh and blood, you have to understand the dynamic in our house. It was complicated. Basically, I was the responsible one, the boring one, the one who paid her taxes early and worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital cleaning up bodily fluids. Chloe was the golden child. She was 5 years younger, beautiful in that effortless, high-maintenance way, and perpetually finding herself. She had dropped out of 3 different colleges, tried to start a jewelry line that failed, and was currently between opportunities. And my parents? They were the classic enablers. They treated her incompetence like a fragile flower that needed to be protected from the harsh winds of reality. And here's the thing about Nana Rose. She was the matriarch. She was tough, she was sharp, but her heart was failing. Congestive heart failure, or CHF. It's a cruel disease. Your heart gets too weak to pump, and fluid starts to back up into your lungs and your legs. You essentially drown in your own body if you don't manage it perfectly. When she took a turn for the worse last year, we had a family meeting. I offered to hire a professional home health aide. I mean, I knew the best agencies in the city, but my parents looked at the cost, $6,000 a month for private care, and they panicked. That's when Chloe stepped up. She sat there at the kitchen table, tears in her eyes, and gave this heartfelt performance about how she wanted to give back, how she wanted to dedicate her life to Nana, how she needed a purpose. My parents ate it up. They looked at me with these shining eyes and basically told me that this was perfect. Chloe would move in with Nana, live rent-free, and they would pay her a stipend of $2,000 a month, plus cover all the household expenses and medical costs. It was a win-win, they said. Chloe got a job, Nana got family care. I tried to object. I tried to explain that caring for a CHF patient requires strict medication management, dietary restrictions, and constant monitoring. I told them Chloe couldn't even keep a cactus alive, but my mother just sighed that heavy. The disappointed sigh she saves for me and said I was being critical. She claimed I was just jealous that Chloe had such a pure heart and that I needed to stop bringing my hospital stress into their home. So, I was overruled, And that's when the isolation started. For the first few months, things seemed fine on the surface, but every time I tried to visit, there was an excuse. Chloe would text me saying Nana was sleeping, or she was having a bad day and didn't want visitors, or that my negative energy upset her. It was subtle at first, then it became aggressive. I remember driving over there one Tuesday after my shift, just wanting to check Nana's vitals, and Chloe wouldn't even open the screen door. She stood there, blocking the entrance, and told me that Nana didn't want to see me. She said I made Nana feel old and sick with my stethoscope and my questions. She looked me dead in the eye with this terrifyingly calm smile and said that if I kept pushing, she would quit. She threatened to walk out and leave Nana alone, forcing my parents to put her in the state-run facility, the one downtown with the cockroach violations and the bed sores. She knew that was my parents' biggest fear. She was holding Nana hostage, and she was using my parents' anxiety as the gun. Honestly, the physical toll on me was becoming visible. I wasn't sleeping. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. convinced my phone was ringing with bad news. My hair was falling out in the shower, great clumps of it clogging the drain. I was working double shifts just to stay distracted, but every time I saw a patient in heart failure, I saw Nana. I saw her drowning. Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized that their kindness is actually just a mask for a parasitic hunger? I tried to talk to my parents, but they were deep in the denial phase. They would visit on Sundays, and Chloe would have Nana dressed up, sitting in her favorite chair, looking rested. My mom would call me afterward and lecture me. She'd say that Nana looked peaceful, that Chloe had decorated the room with flowers, that the house smelled like lavender. She didn't understand that the lavender was there to cover the smell of unwashed sheets. She didn't understand that peaceful in a heart failure patient often means lethargic or hypoxic. They saw a loving granddaughter. I saw a gatekeeper. It wasn't just the isolation, though. It was the spending. Chloe, who had zero income aside from the stipend, started showing up on Instagram with new things, not cheap things. I'm talking about a new iPhone, professional blowouts every week, and designer shoes. When I pointed this out to my dad, asking how she could afford $600 heels on a $2,000 stipend while buying groceries and gas, he just shrugged. He said she was thrifty and that she deserved a treat for doing such hard work. He said I should be proud of her for managing her money so well. I felt like I was taking crazy pills. I mean, the math didn't work. The math literally did not work. But you can't argue with people who have decided that the lie is more comfortable than the truth. And then, there was the ghost memory. It's the thing that stops you from pulling the trigger sooner. I remember one afternoon, before the ban was total, I saw Chloe brushing Nana's hair. For a split second, the sun hit them through the window, and Chloe looked so gentle. She was humming a song they used to sing when we were kids. For a second, I didn't see the narcissist. I saw my little sister. I saw the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I missed that girl. I wanted to believe that she was still in there, that maybe she really was trying her best and I was just being a cynical nurse. I wanted to be wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong so badly. I wish there was another way to fix this without burning the whole house down. But then came the breaking point. It happened on a Thursday. Chloe had posted a story on social media, a selfie of her at a brunch spot downtown, captioned, "Self-Care Day, #caregiver burnout." She was across town. Nana was alone. And I knew the code to the garage keypad. My dad used his birthday, like he does for everything, and I didn't even think. I just drove. I punched the code into the keypad. My dad's birthday, like I said, and the garage door groaned open. I didn't park inside. I left my car running in the driveway. It wasn't a visit. It was a welfare check. And here's the thing about heart failure. You can smell it before you see it. The moment I stepped into the hallway, The air hit me. It was thick, humid, and smelled like stale soup mixed with the sharp chemical sting of cheap air freshener trying to cover up something organic and rotting. The house was dark. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the afternoon sun. I walked into the living room, and there was Nana Rose, sitting in her recliner in the dark. The TV was off. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of her breathing, a wet, rattling rasp that I knew all too well. It's called crackles in the medical world. It's the sound of fluid filling up the air sacs in your lungs. I didn't say hello. I went straight into nurse mode. I knelt beside her. Her ankles were swollen to twice their normal size. I pressed my thumb into her shin, and the indentation stayed there, deep and angry. Pitting edema, grade 3. Her skin was cool and clammy, but she was sweating. She looked at me with these glassy, confused eyes and didn't even recognize me. She just mumbled something about being thirsty, but her lips were cracked and dry. I checked her pill organizer on the side table. Monday's slot was empty. Tuesday's slot was empty, according to the plastic box. She had taken her digoxin and her Lasix, the water pill that keeps the fluid off her lungs. But looking at her legs, looking at the way her jugular vein was distended like a rope on her neck, I knew. The biology doesn't lie. You don't drown in your own fluids if you're taking your diuretics. You have to understand, in that moment, I wasn't angry yet. I was terrified. I was reaching for my phone to call 911 when the front door slammed open. It was Chloe. She breezed in, bringing a gust of fresh air and expensive perfume that clashed violently with the sick room smell of the house. She wasn't wearing scrubs or sweatpants like a caregiver. She was wearing a silk blouse and holding a shopping bag, and not just any bag. She was carrying a brand new, quilted black Lady Dior handbag. I froze. I know what those bags cost. I've looked at them in magazines. That is a $6,000 bag. That is 3 months of my mortgage. That is roughly 8 months of Nana's heart medication if you pay cash. She saw me kneeling by the chair and didn't even look guilty. She looked annoyed. She dropped her keys on the table with this loud clatter and basically demanded to know what I was doing in her house. She didn't ask how Nana was. She didn't ask why I was checking a pulse. She just crossed her arms, shifting that shiny new bag to her hip like a shield, and accused me of spying on her. I stood up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. I pointed at Nana's legs. I pointed at the fluid overload. I told her, using my hospital voice, that Nana was in acute decompensated heart failure and needed a hospital immediately. I asked her point blank when the last time Nana actually took a real pill was. And Chloe? She laughed. It was this short, dismissive sound that made my blood run cold. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being dramatic again. She claimed Nana was fine, just tired, because of the heat. Then she held up the bag, actually flaunted it, and spun this ridiculous story about a new boyfriend who was an investment banker and wanted to spoil her. She looked me dead in the eye, smiling this tight, plastic smile, and said that unlike me, some people didn't have to work themselves to death to have nice things. But I did the math. The stipend was $2,000. The meds were $800. Rent was free. If she stopped buying the meds, she cleared nearly $3,000 a month. That bag wasn't a gift. That bag was Nana's diuretic. I told her I was calling Mom and Dad. I told her I was calling the police. And that's when she played the card. That's when the trap snapped shut. She stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to this terrifyingly calm whisper. She didn't scream. She just reminded me of the reality. She said that if I called them, if I made a scene, she would pack her bags and leave that night. She said she would tell Mom that I bullied her out of the house. And then, who would watch Nana? She reminded me that Mom and Dad were broke, that they couldn't afford the $6,000 private facility. She reminded me that the only other option was Shady Acres, the state facility where they strap patients to beds and the hallways smell like urine. She smiled, a genuine, a predatory smile, and basically told me that Nana's comfort depended entirely on me keeping my mouth shut. She was holding Nana hostage. She was using my fear of the state home to blackmail me into letting her slowly kill our grandmother. I looked at Nana, who was dozing off in the chair, her chest heaving with the effort to breathe. I looked at the Lady Dior bag sitting on the counter, gleaming under the kitchen lights. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. I realized then that Chloe wasn't my sister. She wasn't finding herself. She wasn't struggling. She was a parasite. She was actively metabolizing our grandmother's life force and converting it into luxury goods. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I forced my face into a mask of defeat. I lowered my voice and apologized. I told her she was right, that I was just stressed from work, and that I shouldn't have intruded. I saw her shoulders relax. She thought she had won. She thought I was the same old Elena who would roll over to keep the peace. But as I walked out to my car, leaving Nana in that dark, smelling room, I wasn't crying anymore. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I wasn't the sister anymore. I was the hunter. And I knew that to catch a predator this comfortable, I needed more than a hunch. I needed a 4K resolution smoking gun. Family is just a biological coincidence. This was war. Let's just say that paranoia is a very efficient fuel. It burns cleaner than anger and lasts longer than sadness. I knew that Chloe's yoga schedule was sacred. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 to noon. That was my window. Then I still had the spare key, the one I'd sworn to my parents I lost 3 years ago during a move. Honestly, lying to them felt dirty back then, but standing on the front porch with my heart hammering against my ribs, that lie felt like the only smart thing I'd ever done. The key turned with a stiff, rusty clunk, and I was in. The house was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was that heavy, suffocating silence you find in a room where someone is waiting to die. The air was still thick with that cloying lavender spray, masking the underlying scent of unwashed bedding. I moved fast. I wasn't there to steal. I was there to install the eyes that would see what I couldn't. I had bought a small motion-activated spy camera, the kind that looks like a USB charger block. I plugged it into the outlet right behind the kitchen island, like the one facing the sink and the medication cabinet. It was invisible in plain sight. I needed to see her preparation routine. I needed to see the alchemy of her neglect. But the camera was just the insurance. I needed the smoking gun now. I walked over to the counter where the pill organizers were lined up like little plastic soldiers. My hands were shaking, not from fear of getting caught. Chloe was too self-absorbed to come back early, but from the terror of being right. I picked up the bottle labeled digoxin. It was full. Too full. Nana had been on this dose for 3 years. The refill date was 2 days ago. I shook it. The rattle sounded dull. I poured a few into my palm. They were white, round, scored down the middle. They looked like digoxin. But as a nurse, you develop a tactile memory for medications. These felt too powdery, too soft. I brought one up to my nose. Nothing. Then I did something you're never supposed to do outside of a desperate diagnostic moment. I touched the tip of my tongue to the pill. Digoxin is bitter. It's a chemical bitterness that stays with you. This tasted like chalk and peppermint. I mean, my stomach actually dropped. It was a physical sensation, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. It was breathless. She wasn't just skipping doses. She was manufacturing a placebo. She was taking the time to crush up breath mints or sugar pills to fill the bottle so that if my parents looked, they'd see medicine. I needed the paper trail. I needed to know where the real medicine, or rather, the money for the medicine, had gone. I went to the kitchen trash. I didn't care about the dignity of it anymore, and I pulled on a pair of latex gloves from my pocket and started digging. Coffee grounds, takeout containers, a discarded yogurt lid. And then, at the very bottom, beneath a wet paper towel, I found a crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed it out on the counter. It was damp and stained with coffee, but the text was legible. It wasn't a receipt. It was the original prescription script for the digoxin and the Lasix dated 3 days ago. It had never been filled. She hadn't even gone to the pharmacy. She had just thrown the prescription away. But here is the thing that turned my blood from cold to freezing. Next to the trash can, Chloe had left her iPad unlocked on the counter. It was playing a Spotify playlist called Manifesting Wealth. I minimized the music and opened her email. I knew it was an invasion of privacy. I knew it was illegal. I didn't care. I was looking for a murder weapon. I searched transfer. And there it was. The timestamp was from yesterday, the day she walked in with the bag. I opened the email. I read it 3 times just to make sure my brain wasn't hallucinating the cruelty of it. I need you to visualize this. A sterile digital confirmation of a transaction that cost a woman her breath. The email read, "Payment confirmed, the Real Luxury Consignment, order number 44,902, item, Christian Dior, Lady Dior Canage Lambskin, total charged, $6,450. Payment method, Visa ending in 9902. I checked the next email down. It was a bank alert for the joint account she shared with my parents for household expenses. Alert. Large transaction detected. $6,500 transferred to Visa ending in 9902. My ears started ringing. It was a high-pitched whine that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was just staring at the screen, feeling the absolute zero of her empathy. She hadn't just bought a bag. She had looked at the money meant to keep our grandmother's heart pumping, and she had decided that a quilted leather accessory was a better investment. I took photos of everything. The fake pills, the crumpled prescription, the email receipts, the bank transfer. I took a sample of the fake pills and put them in a sterile specimen bag I'd brought from the hospital. I put everything back exactly as I found it. The crumpled paper went back under the coffee grounds. The iPad went back to the Manifesting Wealth playlist. I wiped the counter where I had touched it. As I locked the front door and walked back to my car, the sun was shining. Birds were singing. It felt offensive. The world looked normal, but I was carrying a grenade in my pocket. I had the receipts. I had the motive. I had the weapon. Now I just had to make sure the explosion didn't kill the hostage. Here's the thing about hunting a narcissist. They don't actually believe they can be caught. Their arrogance is the only camouflage they use. And so, to get back into the house, to get access to the television for the party, and to make sure my grandmother survived the night, I had to do the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I had to apologize. I mean, literally, I had to pick up the phone, dial Chloe's number, and swallow my pride until it tasted like battery acid. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, watching the rain streak down the windshield, rehearsing the lines. I had to sound broken. I had to sound like the jealous older sister who had finally realized she was beaten. When she picked up, I didn't even let her say hello. I just launched into this pathetic, winding apology. I told her she was right. I told her that I was just stressed from the ICU, that I was projecting my work onto her, and that I knew she was doing a great job with Nana. I even threw in a line about how the house looked so much better since she took over, which was a lie that almost made me gag, considering the place smelled like lavender-scented decay. And honestly, Listening to her reaction was terrifying. She didn't question it. She didn't suspect a thing. She just sighed this long, dramatic exhale and said she was glad I finally saw the light. She started lecturing me. Me. A critical care nurse, about how caregiving is about energy and vibes, not just pills and doctors. She sounded so benevolent, so gracious, like a queen accepting the surrender of a rebellious peasant. It was exactly what I needed. I told her that to make it up to her, and to show Mom and Dad that we were a united front. I wanted to handle the technical side of Nana's 80th birthday party. I offered to make the slideshow, the grandma through the years montage that plays on the big screen while everyone eats cake. Chloe loved that. Of course she did. It was work she didn't have to do, and it was a chance for her to be the star of the show without lifting a finger. She agreed immediately, telling me to make sure I included plenty of pictures of her and Nana together, to show the bond they shared. I promised her I would. Oh, I absolutely would. But getting access to the TV was only half the problem. The real issue was the hostage. You have to understand, even with the evidence I had, the fake pills, the bank transfers, the video of her trashing the script, I couldn't just walk in there and start screaming. Chloe had medical power of attorney. If I called the police beforehand or if I confronted her at the party without a plan, she could legally kick me out. She could claim I was harassing her. Worst case scenario, she could delay the ambulance while Nana was in active heart failure. And with an ejection fraction as low as Nana's, a delay of 20 minutes could mean a stroke. It could mean death. I needed an extraction team. I needed a way to get Nana out of that house that bypassed Chloe's authority entirely. So, I called Mark. Mark is a paramedic I've worked with for 6 years. He's the guy you want when a car is wrapped around a telephone pole. He's seen everything, and nothing rattles him. I met him at a diner halfway between the hospital and my parents' house. I didn't just tell him the story, I showed him the receipts. I pulled up the video on my phone, the hidden camera footage of Chloe dumping the digoxin down the sink. I showed him the photo of the pills that were just crushed breath mints. I showed him the picture of Nana's swollen legs from my last visit. Mark didn't say a word for a long time. He just stared at the screen, his jaw tightening until a muscle in his cheek started to jump. He pushed his coffee away like he was suddenly nauseous. He looked at me and asked one question. Is she altered? I told him yes. She was hypoxic. Confusion. Lethargy. Disorientation. He nodded. That was the key. In emergency medicine, if a patient has an altered mental status, they cannot legally refuse care, and their power of attorney cannot block a life-saving transport if the patient is in immediate danger. It's called implied consent. If you are dying and you don't know your own name, we own you. We take you. No one stops us. So we built the timeline. It had to be precise, like a synchronized swimmer's routine, but with handcuffs. The party was scheduled for Saturday night. Cocktails at 6 p.m., dinner at 7 p.m., the toast and tribute at 7:30 p.m. That was our window. Mark agreed to have his rig parked 2 streets over at 7:15 p.m. I would signal him via text. He would come in not as a party guest, but as a dispatch response. I would call 911 at exactly 7:28 p.m., reporting a cardiac event and elder abuse in progress, specifically requesting his unit. But I couldn't just rely on Mark. I needed the legal hammer to drop at the exact same moment. I went to the sheriff's department that afternoon. I knew a deputy there. His wife was a patient of mine last year. I sat in his office and laid it all out. The fraud. The theft, the physical neglect. I handed him a flash drive with everything. The bank statements showing the Dior bag purchase, the video of the medication tampering, the unfilled prescription script. He looked through the file, and his face went from polite interest to stone-cold professional anger. He told me that this wasn't just theft, it was criminal negligence and assault. He said they could arrest her, but they needed to catch her in the act or have the victim present. I told him to come to the party. I told him to wait outside until the ambulance pulled up. I told him that at 7:35 p.m., there would be a confession playing on the living room television that would make his job very, very easy. The setup was complete. The night before the party, I went over to the house to test the equipment. Chloe was there, frantic, trying to decide which dress made her look most like a saint. She barely looked at me. I walked into the living room, connected my laptop to the massive 75-inch smart TV my parents had bought, another thing they couldn't afford, and loaded the file. I had named it Nana_80_birthday_montage_final.mp4. I checked the sound. I checked the image quality. It was crisp. I watched the first 30 seconds. Just sweet photos of Nana holding us as babies, old Super 8 footage of her gardening. It was innocuous. It was boring. Then I scrubbed forward to the mark. 12:45. That's where the music, Wind Beneath My Wings, would cut out abruptly. That's where the screen would go black for 2 seconds. And that's where the hidden camera footage would begin. I paused it right there, my finger hovering over the space bar. Chloe walked in behind me. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. She was holding a glass of wine, smiling that shark-like smile. She asked if the video was ready. She asked if I had made sure to put the picture of her graduating high school in there. I looked her dead in the eye. I forced my face to soften. I channeled every ounce of patience I had left. "It's perfect, Chloe," I said. "Honestly, it's going to be the highlight of the night. Everyone is going to see exactly what you've done for this family." She beamed. She actually preened, adjusting her hair in the reflection of the TV screen that was currently loaded with her own indictment. She touched my arm, a cold, patronizing pat, and said she was glad we were finally on the same page. I walked out to my car that night feeling a strange kind of vibration in my bones. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the hum of a machine that had been switched on and couldn't be turned off. I had the ambulance, I had the police, I had the video, and I had the hostage rescue plan. Basically, I had built a guillotine in the middle of a birthday party, and tomorrow my sister was going to stick her head right in the hole. Let's just say that a lie, when fully dressed up in evening wear and holding a glass of champagne, looks a hell of a lot like the truth. The driveway was already full when I pulled up at 6:45 p.m. My parents had gone all out, or rather, they had allowed Chloe to go all out with Nana's credit card. The house was lit up like a landing strip. There were fairy lights strung through the oak trees, a catered buffet set up on the patio, and a rented bartender mixing drinks in the foyer. The air smelled of expensive perfume, shrimp cocktail, and that distinct sugary scent of store-bought frosting. It was a perfect, beautiful, expensive celebration for a woman who was currently suffocating in the corner of her own living room. I walked in, and the sensory overload was immediate. The hum of conversation was loud, punctuated by the sharp clinking of crystal glasses and the smooth jazz playlist Chloe had curated. I saw my aunts and uncles, people I hadn't seen since Christmas, milling around, laughing, holding plates of hors d'oeuvres. They looked happy. They looked relieved. To them, this party was proof that everything was fine. It was proof that the difficult situation with Nana had been handled, and they didn't have to worry about the messy reality of aging. And there she was, Nana Rose. She was sitting in her wheelchair in the center of the room, positioned like a prop in a stage play. Chloe had dressed her in a heavy silk blouse that must have been sweltering, and there was a blanket draped over her legs. To the untrained eye, she just looked like a tired old lady. But I'm an ICU nurse. I don't see tired. I see pathology. I walked straight to her, ignoring the looks from my cousins. Up close, the picture fell apart. And her skin was gray, not pale, gray. Her lips had a slight bluish tint, a sign of central cyanosis. She was breathing shallow and fast, her accessory muscles in her neck working hard just to pull air into her fluid-filled lungs. Her eyes were glassy, darting around the room but not focusing on anything. She looked terrified, but she didn't have the breath to speak. I knelt beside her. "Nana," I whispered. She blinked at me. It took her a full 5 seconds to register my face. Her hand, cold and clammy, fluttered toward mine. "Elena," she wheezed. It wasn't a greeting, it was a plea. "Thirsty." I looked at the table next to her. There was a glass of champagne, untouched, obviously, but no water. No ice chips. Just a decorative napkin and a small velvet box. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and smelled of expensive lotion. "Don't give her water, Elena." Chloe's voice purred from above me. "She's had her limit for the day. Doctor's orders. We don't want to overload her, right?" I stood up and turned around. Chloe was radiant. She was wearing a white lace cocktail dress that looked suspiciously bridal. Her hair was done in loose, professional waves, and her makeup was flawless. She was holding a microphone in one hand and her phone in the other, probably live streaming the event. And on her arm, hanging from the crook of her elbow like a trophy, was the Lady Dior bag. The black lambskin leather caught the light. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. It looked like a tombstone. "You look healthy?" I said, my voice flat. I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "I try," she sighed, brushing a stray hair from her face. "It's been so exhausting, honestly, planning all this, taking care of her 24/7. But she deserves it. Look at her. She's having the time of her life." She gestured to Nana, who was currently staring blankly at a balloon, gasping for air. "Right," I said. "She looks stunned." "You're just in time for the speeches," Chloe said, checking her Apple Watch. Another new purchase, I noted. "I'm going to do the tribute and then we'll cut the cake. Try not to cause a scene, okay? Mom and Dad are really happy tonight." I looked across the room. My parents were holding court by the bar, beaming. My dad was laughing at a joke my uncle made, clapping him on the back. My mom was showing off her bracelet. They were oblivious. They were drunk on the relief of having solved the problem of Nana without having to do the work themselves. They had outsourced their conscience to Chloe, and the invoice was being paid in human suffering. Have you ever stood in a room full of people celebrating a lie and felt the physical weight of the truth in your pocket? It feels like you're carrying a bomb that only you can hear ticking. The music lowered. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. Ting, ting, ting. The room went quiet. The faces turned toward the fireplace where Chloe was standing. She adjusted the microphone, gave a little shy wave to the applause, and assumed the position of the grieving saint. "Thank you, everyone," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Nana Rose. You know, when I moved in 6 months ago, people told me I was crazy. They said, 'Chloe, you're young. You should be out partying. You should be starting a career.' But I told them, 'Family is a career.'" A chorus of awe rippled through the room. My mother wiped a tear from her eye. Chloe continued, gaining confidence. "It hasn't been easy. The nights are long. The medical schedule is intense." She paused for effect, looking solemn. "The medications alone cost a fortune, but I tell my parents every month, it doesn't matter what it costs. We will pay whatever we have to pay to keep her heart beating. Because you can't put a price tag on love." I felt my stomach lurch. She was actually talking about the money. She was bragging about the cost of the pills she was throwing down the sink. The audacity was so sharp it almost drew blood. She looked directly at me then. It wasn't a warm look. It was a challenge. And I want to thank my sister Elena for being here, she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. I know you're busy at the hospital, saving strangers. It means so much to Nana that you finally made time to come see her. We know how hard it is for you to deal with, well, with the messy part of life. The room turned to look at me. The gazes were pitying. Poor Elena, the cold nurse who can't handle her own grandmother. Poor Elena, the jealous sister. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I held Chloe's gaze and I slowly, deliberately checked my own watch. It was 7:25 p.m. You're doing a great job, Chloe, I said. My voice was loud enough to carry in the silence. Really, the attention to detail is incredible. She smiled, taking it as a compliment. She turned back to the crowd. So, before we cut the cake, I wanted to share a little video montage I put together. Just some memories of the woman we all love. She pointed the remote at the giant 75-inch screen mounted above the fireplace. Music, please, she chirped. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. The opening chords of Wind Beneath My Wings filled the room. The first slide was a black and white photo of Nana on her wedding day, vibrant and young. The guests cooed. My dad put his arm around my mom. Chloe stood to the side, posing, holding her Dior bag with both hands in front of her, basking in the glow of her own benevolence. She looked like she had won. She looked untouchable. I slipped my hand into my pocket and texted Mark. One word, now. Then I texted the deputy, go. I took a step back, melting into the shadows near the hallway. I watched the screen. I watched the timestamp ticking forward in my head. 10 seconds to the drop. The slideshow transitioned to a photo of Nana holding Chloe as a baby. The room said, "Ah," again. 5 seconds. Chloe took a sip of her champagne, her eyes scanning the room for approval. 3 seconds. I looked at Nana. She was slumped in her chair, eyes closed. Hang on, Nana, just hang on. The cavalry is coming. 0. The music cut out with a jagged electronic screech. The screen went black. The room went silent. Technical difficulties? Chloe laughed nervously, tapping the remote. 1 sec, guys. Technology, right? And then, the screen flared back to life. But it wasn't a photo of Nana. It was a high-definition, 4K video of a kitchen sink. At first, the room didn't understand what it was seeing. And it takes the human brain a few seconds to switch from sentimental birthday montage to forensic evidence of a felony. The screen was huge, 75 inches of crystal-clear 4K resolution. And on it, the image was unmistakable. It was a high-angle shot of the kitchen island, filmed from the perspective of the bookshelf. You could see the granite countertop. You could see the bottle of digoxin. And you could see Chloe. She wasn't wearing the white saint dress she had on now. She was wearing a bathrobe, holding her phone to her ear with her shoulder, and she was laughing. The sound from the speakers was crisp. It cut through the party chatter like a knife through silk. On the screen, Chloe opened the orange pill bottle. She walked over to the sink. And then, the sound that will haunt my parents forever filled the room. The rattle-hiss splash of $300 worth of heart medication hitting the stainless steel drain. Whirr! The sound of the garbage disposal on the video was deafening. It roared like a beast eating my grandmother's lifeline. In the living room, a glass shattered. I think it was my Aunt Linda. She dropped her wine, and the red liquid splashed across the beige carpet like a gunshot wound, but nobody looked down. Every single pair of eyes was glued to the screen. Chloe froze. She was standing by the fireplace, the remote still in her hand, her mouth open in a perfect O of confusion. She pressed a button. Nothing happened. I had locked the casting stream from my laptop. She couldn't stop it. On the screen, the video Chloe was talking. And this was the part that I knew would end her. She wasn't just throwing the pills away, she was bragging about it. Her voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, clear and arrogant. "No, I didn't pick up the refill. Why would I? She doesn't even know what day it is. Brave? It's $800 a month. Do you know what I can buy with that? Besides, the doctor said her heart is at 20% anyway. I'm basically doing nature a favor." The room went so cold I could feel the temperature drop on my skin. It was a physical vacuum. The air was sucked out of the space. My mother, standing by the bar, let out this strangled, whimpering sound, like she had been punched in the throat. My father looked at the screen, then at Chloe, then at Nana, his face draining of color until he looked like a ghost. Video Chloe laughed again. A cruel, dismissive cackle. "Relax. She's fine. I gave her some Tic Tacs. Placebo effect, right?" Real Chloe finally snapped out of her paralysis. She screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a primal shriek of panic. She threw the remote at the TV, cracking the screen, but not stopping the video. She lunged toward the power cord, scrabbling behind the console unit like a trapped rat, tearing at the wires to kill the feed. But it was too late. The timestamp on the video faded, and the screen went black just as the real-world front door exploded inward. Boom! It wasn't a polite knock. It was a breach. "Paramedics, clear the way!" Mark's voice was a thunderclap. He didn't wait for an invitation. He and his partner stormed into the foyer, pushing past the stunned bartender, carrying a jump bag and a portable monitor. And they weren't moving like party guests. They were moving like soldiers in a combat zone. The crowd parted instantly, a sea of sequins and suits splitting for the uniforms. I stepped out of the shadows. I pointed at Nana. "Patient is in acute congestive heart failure, cyanotic, edematous, possible toxicity from withdrawal. Get her on O2, now." Mark didn't ask questions. He was on his knees beside Nana in 2 seconds. He slapped the pulse oximeter on her finger. The portable monitor beeped, a frantic, high-pitched alarm that synced perfectly with the chaos in the room. "SAT is 82%, Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "She's drowning, Elena. We need to load and go. Now." Chloe scrambled up from the floor, her hair wild, her face flushed with a terrifying mix of rage and terror. She tried to step in front of the wheelchair. She actually tried to physically block the paramedics. She started screaming that this was a private party, that they had no right to be there, that I was crazy and had hacked the TV. She was hysterical, flailing her arms, her voice cracking into this high, shrill pitch of desperation. And that's when the second wave hit. Behind the paramedics, the heavy, authoritative boots of the sheriff's deputy echoed on the hardwood floor. He walked in slowly, his hand resting on his belt. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at the buffet. He looked straight at Chloe. He walked right up to her, looming over her white lace dress like a storm cloud. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The authority radiating off him was heavy enough to crush the air in her lungs. "Chloe Miller?" he asked. It wasn't a question. She froze. She looked at my parents, her eyes wide and pleading. She looked for the enablers. She expected my dad to step in, to write a check, to make the bad man go away. But my dad was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, unable to even look at her. My mom was sobbing silently, clutching her chest, staring at the daughter she had defended for years, and finally seeing the monster underneath the makeup. There was no one left to save her. "You are under arrest for elder abuse, neglect, and grand larceny," the deputy said, his voice flat and bored, like he was reading a grocery list. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, the one holding the microphone. He twisted it behind her back. Chloe dropped the mic. It hit the floor with a loud thud screech of feedback that made everyone wince. "You're hurting me!" she shrieked. "Mom! Dad, do something! Elena did this! She's lying! The deputy didn't care. He spun her around and slammed her against the wall next to the fireplace, right under the TV screen that was still flickering with the paused image of her crime. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 was the loudest sound in the world. It was the sound of consequences arriving, late but heavy. The room was in total chaos now. The guests were whispering, pointing, covering their mouths. Mark and his partner were lifting Nana onto the stretcher. Nana looked around, confused, the oxygen mask fogging up with her breath. But when she saw me, her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked safe. I walked over to the stretcher as they rolled her toward the door. I squeezed her hand. "I've got you, Nana," I whispered. "We're going to the good hospital." As they wheeled her out, the deputy turned Chloe around to march her out the same door. She looked wrecked. Her mascara was running, her dress was rumpled. But the pièce de résistance was the bag. The Lady Dior bag was still looped over her arm, awkwardly twisted by the handcuffs. The deputy paused. He looked at the bag. He looked at me. Then, with a practiced motion, he slid the bag off her arm. "Evidence," he muttered, handing it to his partner who was bagging items. Chloe let out a sound that I can only describe as a dying animal's whimper. That bag was the only thing she truly loved. It was her status. It was her identity. And watching it get shoved into a brown paper evidence bag was the final nail in the coffin of her ego. I stood by the door as they dragged her past me. She stopped fighting. She just looked at me. Her eyes were black holes of hatred. She looked like she wanted to spit on me, to curse me, to burn me to the ground. She opened her mouth to say something, probably to blame me for ruining her life, for being jealous, for being the villain in her story. But I didn't let her speak. I leaned in close, so only she could hear me over the sirens wailing outside. I looked at the empty spot on her arm where the bag used to be, and then I looked her dead in the eye. "That bag cost $6,500, I whispered. "But the lawyer you're going to need starts at 10. Let's just say that the wheels of justice grind slow, but when they finally crush you, they don't leave much behind." The fallout wasn't immediate. It was a slow, agonizing bleed. The night of the party, the house didn't just empty out. It was abandoned. The guests fled like they were escaping a contagion. My parents were left standing in a living room littered with half-eaten cake and shattered glass, staring at a blank TV screen that had just broadcast their failure to the entire neighborhood. The charges were heavy. Elder abuse is a felony in this state. So is grand larceny over $5,000. And because the victim was a vulnerable adult, the district attorney, who had seen the video, wasn't interested in a plea deal. He wanted a scalp. Chloe spent 3 days in county lockup before my parents could even scrape together the bail money. And honestly, I think those 3 days broke her more than the actual prison sentence will. She's a girl who needs a ring light and a filter to exist. And being stripped of her phone, her skincare routine, and her audience was a form of psychological torture she wasn't built for. When she finally walked out, she looked gray. The shine was gone. The golden child had tarnished. But the real ruin was financial. You have to understand, my parents were never rich. They were leveraged. They were mortgaged up to their eyeballs to maintain the appearance of success. And when the forensic accountant started digging through the family finances to trace the stolen money, they found holes everywhere. Chloe hadn't just raided the medical fund, she had maxed out 3 credit cards in my dad's name. She had taken out a small business loan for her jewelry line using Nana's social security number. The "for sale" sign went up on the lawn 2 weeks later. It wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. The legal fees for Chloe's defense were astronomical. Lawyers who defend elder abuse cases don't work on contingency, and the restitution order for the stolen money was immediate. My parents are moving into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. It's a nice place, I guess, but it doesn't have a crystal punch bowl, and it definitely doesn't have a guest room for a daughter who is awaiting trial. And the social death? That was almost worse than the jail time. In a small town, or even a tight-knit suburb, reputation is currency. And Chloe is bankrupt. She can't walk into the local coffee shop without heads turning. She can't post on Instagram because the comments section is a war zone of strangers calling her a monster. She's a pariah. The influencer who influenced herself right into a criminal record. As for Nana Rose, she's safe. And we got her into a legitimate skilled nursing facility, one with real nurses, real medication logs, and zero tolerance for vibes. It's not cheap, but between Nana's pension and the money recovering from the sale of Chloe's assets, yes, the bag was auctioned. We made it work. I visit her 3 times a week. Her color is back. Her legs are normal. She's gained 5 pounds and she actually recognizes me now. Last Tuesday, I stopped by my parents' house one last time before the closing. The movers were there, hauling boxes of memories into a truck. The house smelled different. The lavender spray was gone. The underlying scent of sickness was gone. It just smelled like dust and cardboard. I walked into the kitchen. The island was empty. The spot where the digoxin bottle used to sit was just a slab of cold granite. I looked at the sink. The garbage disposal was silent. I didn't feel happy, exactly. Happiness implies joy. This was something deeper. It was the feeling of a bone setting properly after being broken for years. It was the relief of knowing that the predator had been defanged. I walked out to the back patio. My dad was sitting there on a lawn chair, staring at the empty yard. He looked 10 years older. He didn't say anything to me. He couldn't. What do you say to the daughter who saved your mother by destroying your other daughter? There are no Hallmark cards for that. I drove home with the windows down. The air was crisp. It smelled like rain and asphalt. Clean, sharp, real. I stopped at a gas station and bought a cheap cup of coffee. It was burnt, bitter, and cost $1.50. I took a sip. It tasted better than any champagne I have ever had. And it tasted like the truth.